Good afternoon, Professor John Deedy here, Professor of Political Science at the Community Colleges of Baltimore County. Today I'm going to talk to you about federalism, what it is, and how it works. The simple definition of federalism is a political organization uniting separate political groups within the political system by distributing power among governments, designed to protect the existence and authority of all. If you think about our Constitution, that's what it did, protect the existence and all of the federal, state, and local governments. It needs cooperation to work. The United States is a federal system, and a successful federal system. Federalism differs from unitary government, in which sovereignty is vested solely in the national government, with basically the state and local governments functioning as agents of the national government. Unitary system of central government makes the important decisions with little say for the local governments, kind of like in France, where our system of federalism is like a marble cake, theirs is more of a layer cake. Justice Brandeis, in a Supreme Court decision, referred to the states as laboratories of democracy. Basically, in his decision that he made years ago, he talked about how the state should have the right to experiment and try a variety of things. If a state tries something in Maryland and it works, it can go national. If a state like Colorado tries legalization of marijuana and it works, other states can do it. If a state tries something and it doesn't work, it only impacts that one state. It doesn't impact the whole country. The U.S. government has expressed powers, specific enumerated powers, in Article 1 of the Constitution in Section 8. The first 17 clauses of that. Specific things the national government has the power to do. It also has implied powers, things that are implied over a period of time. With the necessary and proper clause, Section 18. Necessary and proper clause got a test in McCulloch versus Maryland. There's nothing in the Constitution that says the government has the right to create a national bank. But the Supreme Court said creating a national bank is something that's necessary and proper. The word bank isn't in the Constitution, but Justice Marshall said this is appropriate and something that needs to be done and can be done by the national government. They also refer to this as the elastic clause. And the simple way to explain elastic, think of something stretchable, like a rubber band. That's what our Constitution is at times. While some people may be strict constructionists, really it is a flexible document. The supremacy clause provides that the national law will prevail over the states in the Constitution. And then in the Constitution, there's concurrent powers, powers for the national government and also the state and local governments. But federalism does have some problems. The federal government passes a law, and there's 50 different ways of how 50 states will deal with a national law. Think about coronavirus and how 50 different states took 50 different approaches when the national government said, here's what we think should be done. States, at many times, can be more responsive because they're closer to the people. Sometimes states are seen as middle managers, but they're very important in their role. Article 4 of the Constitution outlines the duties states have to each other and that the federal government has to the states. Full faith and credit shall be given in each state the public acts, records, and judicial proceedings of every other state. In other words, if you're divorced in Nevada, that divorce is recognized in New York. The courts, the best way to describe them, they're federalism's referees. They're the ones that have to try to sort out a lot of these matters. Article 1, Section 2 requires interstate protections of the privileges and immunities in the Constitution. One of the most interesting Supreme Court cases related to federalism was Gibbons versus Ogden in 1824. The court supported the federal government power over interstate commerce between the states, because it affected the national economy. There are 4 major stages of federalism in our history. Dual federalism from the time of Washington until about the 1930s, when basically the federal and state governments worked separately. Duo meaning two, federal governments did their thing, state governments did their thing. They didn't intermingle and mesh together. But the system of dual federalism, which was tested during the Civil War, whereas the South basically felt as an issue in federalism, we have the right to leave the Union, and the North said, no, you can't. Once you join the United States, you're a member for life. In 1933, with the election of President Roosevelt and him taking office, cooperative federalism made its appearance, lasting to about the early 60s. Cooperative federalism was designed during a terrible economic time. The state and federal governments will cooperate and work together to solve problems. The idea being that Washington can offer its expertise to the states and help them out with a variety of problems. In 1937, in an important Supreme Court case, the Supreme Court recognized that an industrial economy must be subject to some national regulations to serve the nation's needs and interests, weakening the laissez-faire economics of capitalism, which believed business interests should be allowed to do whatever they want to do without government interference. The Depression changed the federal relationship between the states and national government. During the Johnson administration, there was the era of creative federalism in the 1960s, where basically it emphasized the idea of the federal government willing to help the states and giving them a lot of liberty to do things, with not a lot of management, but give them a lot of money. The federal government worked with local communities to determine the needs of the states. At the end of the Johnson administration, with the arrival of President Nixon, a new era of federalism emerged, which still is in existence today, called New Federalism. It focused on the idea of devolution, the idea that federalism will be improved if you shift the authority from the federal government to the state and local governments. In other words, find things the federal government is doing, let the states do them. Give the states more responsibility. The program started under President Nixon, but with President Reagan, they pushed it even further. The idea being, let's turn over anything to the states. The one problem, though, with President Reagan was they turned a lot of things over to the states with no micromanagement, but often at times they gave the states less money to work with, so the states had to get more creative. Reagan's idea was to decrease the size of the federal government, which worked in some instances, but the problem is it increased the size and role of state governments. Reagan's style was a hands-off management style, but budgetary pressures and public opinion led to changes over time in the federal-state relationship. The Republican Revolution of the 1990s was focused on even giving more authority, more devolution, more deregulation to the states. The idea, fewer unfunded mandates. Unfunded mandates is when the federal government says, you have to do this, but we're not going to give you a lot of money to do it. And the idea is, let's turn more things over to the states, but not make the states completely financially responsible for things. Federalism is even different among the states. In some states, the governor is very weak. In Maryland, the power is very strong. Power in some states among local and state governments, and school boards even differ. In some states, they elect school boards. In other states, they don't. In some states, in the far west, driving 80 to 95 miles an hour is acceptable. In other states, it's not. All the states do things differently based on what their needs are in the federal relationship and what works for them. Even when schools start, some schools in the Deep South start their years in early August. Other states don't start till early September. In the 1960s, the Supreme Court used federalism on states, declaring state laws unconstitutional, such as in Gideon and Miranda, and then basically told the states, this law is unconstitutional, you now need to figure out how to fix the problem. Organizations like the Council of State Legislatures and the National Governors Association produce policy ideas designed to make things easier for the states. One of the things that states like a lot is interstate compacts. Think of these as treaties between the states. When states have problems among themselves, they work out agreements to solve the problems, whether it be on the issue of transportation, education, etc. Some of the many famous compacts include education compacts between states, such as the 1956 New England Higher Education Compact. The Chesapeake Bay has a compact. It's not just up to Maryland to keep the bay clean. Pollution in the bay can start from places like New York and Virginia. And that's why when you have a compact to fix the bay, you need several states involved. There are about 120 compacts today in effect. And the process of creating a compact isn't really that difficult. There are 4 simple stages. First, the parties negotiate, come to an agreement. Then Congress approves. The states approve. And then implementation of the program. Rather simple, easy process for compacts. Tension in federalism between the federal and state and local governments is caused by sometimes the federal government passing laws upon states and not providing the money. Or the idea of you are usurping states' rights. The federal government should not be interfering in these things. Oftentimes, federal government policies provide only part of the money for a program, and the states have to come up with the rest. Oftentimes, and the states don't mind this too much, some of their ideas are even stolen by the federal government and later become national policy, such as the Brady Bill in the 1990s. When federal mandates get passed upon states, the state spending has to increase. They have to come up with the revenue. State and local governments often do not fight clean air laws. And that may sound terrible, but they're trying to help their economy. Clean air is a good idea, but if it costs 2,000 jobs in a small community, that hurts your local economy. Another thing the federal government has done in their history is provide grant money for colleges, setting aside land for schools and universities to be built. The 1787 Northwest Ordinance, for every 12 square miles of land, at least 20 acres had to be set aside for education. Land grants like the first Morrill Act in 1862 was one of those benefits. These type of programs, where the federal government steps in and does these things, are very important. The 1956 Highway Bill, where the federal government provided 90% of the funding that built our interstate highway systems. One last thing about federalism. States are no longer the weak link in the federalism system. They are a strong power. Often they are creating policies the federal government later uses. Because the states have fewer dollars to work with, at times they have to get more creative. When a crisis hits, the state has to figure out how to do something. During the 1980s with the AIDS crisis, many states started giving away free needles. People said, well, you're promoting drug use. And the states were saying, we have an AIDS crisis. We're trying to reduce the number of AIDS victims. And in time, studies showed that providing free needles reduced the AIDS epidemic. When it comes to the border, the federal government protects the border. But then it's up to the states to deal with undocumented people inside their units and what to do about it. Some states may enforce the law strictly. Other states may say, hey, we want them because they'll work hard, and some of the people feel that it's an economic benefit to have their abilities and talents. Finally, one last thing on federalism. At times it's a system that people are confused about and don't understand. But it's an important working relationship between federal, state, and local governments to try to solve problems and work through things. The states play an important role in the matter because the federal government can pass a law, but it's up to the states to implement it. Often when the federal government gives the guidance and provides the financial assistance, the states will be all in. Most importantly of all, take care. Have a great day.